Welcome, everyone, to the World Class Mentors. This is a radio show and podcast celebration of people who have truly achieved world class, and we honor them through sharing their stories and honoring their mentors. One of my favorite people in the world is Brady Patterson, and Brady comes to us all the way from Canada today. Welcome, Brady.
Thank you, Tony. Super happy to be here.
Brady is the COO for Success Road Academy, one of the largest information marketing training centers in the world. You work close to one of my favorite mentors of, if not, the favorite. We've got Iman Agai, and Iman is traveling all over the world right now, right?
That's correct. He's been mobile since May 14th.
And you get to take over.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you left you working while he went out and explored the world. You know what? That is a wonderful goal. I mean, I envy him that he has finally found the ability not only to find the perfect person to run the company while he's out gallivanting, but he has the opportunity to learn and to acquire so much more by his travels around the world. So, Brady, you work to find and create multi-win joint venture partnerships, but you run the entire company, and you have a lot of go-to experts in your field. So, I mean, you've got quite an exciting life yourself, right?
It can be a little haywire sometimes, and definitely there's some excitement that happens for sure, Tony.
So you've got Success Road Academy has 26 chapters, 6 countries, and more than 45,000 members. That's huge, and that's wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit about Brady, though?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I grew up as a farm boy in southern Saskatchewan, Canada, and we lived 5 miles from the nearest neighbor. My day consisted of waking up in the morning, out doing chores. I wasn't allowed to eat until the animals ate, and just getting the work done. Come back in, have breakfast, head to school, come home and repeat. And it was a grind sometimes. A really strong work ethic, and I don't publicly share this very often, and this is probably the first most public way I've done this. For me, it ended up being, personally, me going through life has been a bit of a roller coaster. Though I had that grind of a youth and that definite work ethic that was instilled in me, I also developed a very extreme drug addiction at about 16 years old. And it created a definite divergent path for me from the life that had kind of been set out for me by my family.
Wow, Brady. But what's funny is that I really, truly believe that those types of episodes in our lives are what make us, whole today, because we have the ability to see things through different eyes and understand and be more mellow and more accepting of so many people. And in the world that you and I are in, which is, the coaching, the mentoring, the being there for people when they need us. I mean, that's really a very unique way of looking at them, and it helps us understand more about people than any textbook could ever do.
Yeah, training in the field, like getting out and actually doing the work rather than just reading theory, nothing trumps that.
Agreed. Absolutely agreed. So, Brady, you're in Canada now. Have you always been from there and living there?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Technically, yes. I've never switched over my country of residence for more than a few months at a time. My wife and I had the opportunity to live in Ecuador for a bit, and we lived in Mexico for a while. So each of these were different experiences. But yeah, for the most part, I mean, I grew up in Canada. I had never done anything other than travel until I moved there at about 20. I guess I moved to Ecuador when I was maybe 30. So that was my first time that I ever lived in a different place.
Well, I'm going to mention right now that you have got the absolute most gorgeous wife. She looks like a supermodel. I mean, yeah, you scored, man. You did well.
She is a peach, and she made me work for her, and it was worth every bit of effort.
Brady, you know what I love most about it when we get together in similar surroundings and I hear you talk. I love the fact that you are such a nature buff. You are brave beyond. I mean, you do all kinds of climbing and swimming and going into waterfalls. And you were talking a little bit about how wonderful that life and experience is.
Yeah, I mean, that started young for me. I started going into the wilderness at about 12 years old. I think my first weekend-long trip, solo, just by myself, was in the Canadian Rockies, and I was 3 days by myself, just about 14. And I've never let go of that. In fact, a big part of my former business was, and still I do one-off kind of events, but was teaching people wilderness skills. So taking people out into the wilderness and experiencing what nature's like and learning to live off the land. And those were a lot of things. And it's also part of my lifestyle, part of the environment that I find myself in all the time. I use my environment as kind of like a tool, right? So when I run a cold water swim here in Vancouver every Saturday morning, 12 months a year, whether the water is at the freezing point or just above the freezing point. So the water this winter got down to about 0.4 degrees centigrade, or I think that's about 33 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a little chilly sometimes in the winter and warmer in the summer, obviously. But it allowed us to that environment allows me to perform at a much higher level because it forces that. And so whether I'm hiking or camping or doing my swims or running down the beach, it doesn't really matter. I'm always in nature, playing, hiking, eating the foods that are out there, because I love being able to just walk into nature and find something that I can actually chew on. I don't have to carry food with me. And I think that it comes back to that thing Tony mentioned about mentorship and being in this coaching world. I love to teach people about what's around them and what they can shift in their environment, whether that's internal environment or external environment. And nature allows me to do that. So whether it's teaching people about the different berries that are available here in Canada, or when I traveled, when I was in Mexico, I was teaching even, which is weird to say, but I was teaching some of even the locals, what they can or can't eat. So it was a very weird experience, but it's also something I just love to do. I love to be in that teaching role and helping people experience what nature can provide.
What's funny is I remember my dad telling me, I was raised in South Texas, and he would always tell me, look, if there's a bush full of berries and the birds ain't eating them, don't eat them. I mean, that made sense,
yep.
Right?
That could be very true. I'd have to check out the Texas ecology, but yeah, there's a good chance that that would be a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, we there's a lot of farms and ranches in South Texas, so we get to see a lot of that. But now listen, let me ask you something. I mean, I was a lifeguard and a water safety instructor for years, and we always used to not let kids jump from dry to wet, into the water at 7:00 in the morning, because there was fear of a heart attack or something like that. Too much shock to the system. How do you jump into 30-degree water?
Well, everybody's a bit different. I happen to just walk in. I like that process of getting in slowly because it allows me to kind of take a bit of control of my nervous system, and in a basic way. Obviously, I'm not operating my nervous system that way, but and then some people do jump, and there's not. I mean, heart attacks and things like that. That's usually for people that already have some sort of extreme health condition, like they're at a high risk for something serious. Maybe they have a weak heart, hole in their heart, or some kind of heart condition. But getting into the cold water itself, the reason people might find themselves in a bad situation in there is people will panic, and panic causes a lot of problems. In fact, in nature, most people have heard the term exposure, right? Hey, this person died of exposure or was suffering from exposure. And it's actually a series of conditions it's basically panic. It's panic-induced death, right? So it's a series of actions that you end up taking. People they panic, they run, they get excited, their heart rate goes up, they get sweaty, and then the temperature is cold. So now they start to shiver and get hypothermic. And then, then they maybe get to the point in hypothermia where they start moving articles of clothing because they're hallucinating, thinking it's warm. right? So there's all these factors that come into play. But as far as like just jumping into cold water, the risks are actually incredibly low. It's more, but again, it comes down to your own personal health, and you should always run things past a professional before you do something new in that space, especially when you're going to the extremes of like, almost freezing water.
You're amazing. Absolutely. I can see why people, gravitate to your courses and things because, I mean, if they really do want to know how to live outdoors, you're the man. You're the one to go to, right?
Thank you.
Brady, and we celebrate who you are and what you've accomplished, and I understand what you're doing as COO of a very, very successful company called Success Road Academy, and I congratulate you for that. I've been able to enjoy watching you present, watching you grow, watching you become the leader that you are, and so I celebrate your life as well with you, and that's why we have you on the World Class Mentors, is to honor what you've done. But let me ask you this. We're getting to the part of the show where we dance with the one who brung us, right? And so I want you to think back, and I want you to share who your mentors were and why they made such an impact on you. And with that, I'd like to leave the question to you is who, let's celebrate those who did bring you. Who were they and what did they do?
Got it. Thank you. There's, there's probably dozens and dozens of them. I can actually select three, and I'll do my best to keep it as brief as possible because I know I could talk about all of them for hours. Even these three. So the first one I would say was at the time my mentor has now become a really close friend, and I absolutely adore the man. His name is Satyan Raja. And when I was struggling with my addictions, I had a moment where when I sobered up and I cleaned the slate, as it were, where I was starting to start on a downslide back into that world. And I didn't actually, I wasn't using anymore, things like that, but I was on the brink. I didn't know what to do. I was struggling so much. And my family, and I mean, I'd have to say, one of the first mentors might be my mother, because she's the one that actually took me where I met Satyan. But she took me to this environment, and I met him, and I was like, oh, like this man pushed me to my breaking points mentally, and he challenged me physically, and he pushed things so far for me, and I'm more of an extreme guy. I like those kind of extremes that I felt like there was no turning back. So that moment where I started my downslide and I met Satyan, everything made an abrupt about face. So I literally turned 180 degrees and went the other direction, and I decided I was never going to do that again. And he was, he's big into the personal development world, spiritual development. And so when I did that, that was like, okay, this is in alignment. This is what I want to do. And I actually dove into that world. That was the initial start to my coaching career, right? To starting to head into that space. And at the time, I didn't know that because I was, of course, embroiled in, how do I get out of my own way? How do I get out of my own story? So I didn't see that, but that was the initial catalyst for me going that way. And then the second person was, interestingly enough, another Indian fellow. And that was, I think, a man named Anurag Gupta. And Anurag's company, he specifically worked with folks in basically the environment, coaching the internal and external environments, using it as a trigger. And it's something that I really adopted and took to the extreme. I remember the first time he made a comment to me. We were sitting down, and he said, he looked at me, and he was like, I just want to tell you, you need to understand this, from wherever you are, because I was telling him something, and he was like, you don't know anything. And I was like a little taken aback, and he's like, and you're completely full of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm being confronted this way. Like, who does this man think he is telling me these things? And when I heard that, I was at first I was a bit reactive, and that first meeting. And then later on, as I got to know him, I realized that that was just his philosophy, that as human beings, we are basically full of it completely, and that we don't really know anything. And that, and then when I started looking at that as a philosophy for being, it helped me become a lot calmer, because then I didn't worry about what, when somebody got reactive with me or was really upset because I said something or I challenged them if they were a client and I challenged them, or if they were a friend or a family member and I was like, here, look, you need to like really reconsider this, and they get really reactive, then I would come from a place where like, well, look at him. This person doesn't really, I don't know anything. They don't know anything. They're full of it. I'm full of it. So this is all just like an experience. Okay, well, they're just reacting with where they're at right in this moment, and that's totally okay. And when that happened, there was a really abrupt shift. And the other piece of it was he said right from the beginning that, hey, all of us have some sort of calling. Now, that it doesn't mean that it's a calling for life. Like that, up until that point, everything around purpose and direction, and that was something that was really clear to me. And then everybody that I've been following or that I've been listening to and studying was always saying, well, you have one purpose for life. And I'd always felt incongruent with that, but I couldn't quite place my finger on it. And when Anurag had said, no, you have a calling, but your calling will change as you fulfill it, because your goal is to fulfill that calling, to actually bring it to reality. And when you bring it to reality, then you need to look at what's next. And so I looked at that as like, okay, great. So I can have multi callings, but one at a time, like just follow each other. So my life doesn't have to be, I have to be this for the entire lifetime. I have to be that for my entire lifetime. I only have to do that until I fulfill it. And then I can do something different. And that was an abrupt change. And it really did help shape my life. And in fact, both those two gentlemen, Satyan and Rags, or Anurag, both of them were the two guys that shaped my entire coaching program. Like they're the ones that taught me all the things that I know, a lot of the things that I know. I mean, obviously I learned a few other things elsewhere, but they taught me most of the things that I know when it came to coaching. And finally, it's our mutual friend, Iman Agai. And he, when I met him, I was, actually struggling in my coaching business because I was really wanting to get clients. I was doing talks because people had said I should do talks. And then I was, working with clients one-on-one, obviously, as I was coaching, but it wasn't like a lot of people, and which was okay because I was, charging premium pricing, but it was at the same time this roller coaster of like, I would have them and not have them and find some more, then lose some more. And I was constant because I was just flailing. I had no system to follow, no strategy. I was just like, I'm going to figure this out. And I actually paid quite a few people a lot of money to help me sort it out, but we never put any actual systems into place to make it sustainable. And then when I met Iman and he had these online courses as part of his marketing strategy, like they were the foundation of the marketing for his business, I was like, holy wow, this is amazing. This is a system I can follow. This is a systematic approach to getting clients that I'd never seen before. I was like, there's nothing, like there's no, oh, I have to do this or that and hope that this works out. It was like, here's, people are asking me questions. People are doing things. I could just create a course, for example. And when people ask me questions, I can just give it to them and be like, here, go study this on your own, watch it, come back. And if you want to come back to me when you want to implement it, and then we can talk further. And, for me, it was a really interesting shift because up until that point, business for me, I was really good at being a solopreneur, right? Running everything by myself. I'd been in business since I was 18, and it was, that was my life. I was the lone wolf. And when I met Iman, I was like, I can't be the lone wolf anymore because the lone wolf doesn't make an impact. The lone wolf doesn't accomplish anything socially. He doesn't help people. All he does is run a business, right? All he does is make money. All he does is support his family. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's for any of the lone wolves that end up listening to this. There's nothing wrong with that life. I just knew that I had a calling to help more people. I had a calling to make a bigger impact. And I could not do that if I did everything by myself. So Iman made a really abrupt shift. And he's also where for the first time, it started with Anurag, but it was the first time that I really got into a place where business and my business life and my personal life became one. That's where it finally cemented. Like what I do for business is also what I do for fun. It's also what I do for life. It's these like helping people. Up until that point was always about me, running the business. And then I met him and all of a sudden it was like, now I'm running the business. I am enjoying the business. I'm hanging out with the people that I love. I'm traveling the world, speaking on stages. I'm helping people everywhere. And the people that I'm helping become my friends. The people whose stages I speak on become my friends. Like, it just became my social circle. And that opened up a world, because up until then, like I said, I was a lone wolf and I struggled, and it was not fun. And then all of a sudden it didn't matter. There was no, the limitations of the line between work and play, the work and personal, just blurred, and it became one. And then when that happened for me, that was also at the same point where I was like, okay, I can enjoy this life. I don't have to have separation, and I don't have to feel bad that I don't have separation. I can still have my own time, right? I schedule my weekends off, schedule lots of vacation every year because I need it. I need that time to recharge. But, I'm not even at this point, I'm running, Success Road Academy. And there's often where I work 16-hour days. And often those days, I don't even notice that 16 hours went by, because I'm doing what I feel called to. I love it. And it really supports me as a human being to be able to stay with that.
You know what? It comes across. It absolutely comes across, Brady. I mean, there's real passion there, and it's just so much fun because, as you said, we are around some of the best people in the world who see opportunities for growth or improvement or opportunities to serve, and that's what keeps us all going. I think it's not the bottom line. It's not the almighty dollar, or it's how well we're taking care of others, and I think that's where we're all unified in that one approach. And I think you're great at it. You're going to do great, and I love it, Mom. All right, so let me do one thing here. We're going to end up the show here. We've got a couple more minutes, but I'd like you, Brady, to tell us what you're going to do to pay it forward, and what kind of a legacy would Brady like to leave?
Ooh, that's a great question. When I look at me as a man, what would I want to do? I think the biggest way, what I want to pull forward, when I want to leave as a legacy in the world, is there's a couple of pieces to this. So first, there's a lot of lonely human beings out there. And I would say that number one, of course, there's lonely women, but right now, women are social creatures by nature, typically. And so that's a separate issue. Men we silo. We protect ourselves. We think that we have to be tough for everybody, and we have to stand our ground and say, we're only going to we're going to provide and we're going to protect, but we have to be, we can't show emotion, or we can't do whatever. I think that for me, what I would like to pull forward into the world and put forward into the world is like emotion. Being able to feel is one of the greatest strengths that a man can bring to everything. His relationships in work, his relationships at home, everywhere. And it also allows him to be a complete human being. And so I would like to be able to bring that forward into the world, and not just serve as a model of how that looks, but also help people in that space. So I think that's a powerful thing that gets missed a lot. And when we as men are, the men of the world are isolated, I look at, like, we have a 6 times higher suicide rate than women, right? 70% of the suicides in the world, or I forget the exact number, are men. And it's even higher in the entrepreneurial world, right? We're too alone. So we need to connect. We need to get it around other human beings and stop being in silos. So that's the first thing that I would say I want to do, is help bring those people forward so they can actually stand in the light. They can stand and realize that they don't have to go at it alone. And that would be the biggest thing that I feel I could leave with the world. That to me, if I passed on tomorrow and that I made that change, that is the best life I could have, and the best legacy I could have left behind. The other piece to that is around friendship. Again, it comes back to this thing of of men, and men again, it's back to that silo piece. 50% of men surveyed, there was a survey a couple of years ago, said that they can't identify as having a best friend, someone they can go to when there's trouble, when there's heartache, when they're having a bad day. They can't call somebody and say, hey man, I'm having a rough time. Can I just talk about it, or have a dialogue? And so my goal is to put a dent in that rate. I want that 50% to be 0%. Every man should be able to reach out. Every woman should be able to reach out as well. So I'm not going to exclude that. I just know that men tend to hide themselves a lot more. So with those two pieces covered, right, allowing that to bring into the world, like that would be the best legacy that I could, in my opinion, leave.
That's awesome. Brady, I can't tell you what a pleasure it's been to have you on the show. And once again, everyone, this is the World Class Mentors, and we're celebrating people who have truly achieved world class by serving those who they love best. We honor them through sharing their stories and honoring their mentors. And that's what the World Class Mentors is all about. Again, thank you to Brady Patterson, and have a great week.
Thank you.